I do not sleep well anymore. Most nights I am awake by 2, sometimes 1:30. I lie there in the dark and the thoughts come. Not dreams, not nightmares, just thoughts. Clear and specific and uninvited. Memories that have been waiting all day for the quiet to arrive so they can finally have the room to themselves. My doctor says it is the heart medication. That disrupted sleep is a common side effect at my dosage. Maybe that is true. But I think it is something else. I think the mind saves certain things for the dark. The things you were too busy to sit with during the day. The things you nodded past and filed away and told yourself you had processed when really you had just postponed them. The dark does not allow postponing. The dark makes you sit with everything. My name is Harold Voss. I am 84 years old. I have been awake since 1:47 this morning. I made coffee at 3. I sat in my chair by the window and I watched the street outside go from black to gray to the pale, thin light of early morning. And I thought about everything I am about to tell you. These are not organized lessons. There is no countdown today, no structure, no tidy framework with a number attached to each point. This is just what 2 in the morning sounds like when you are 84 years old and your heart is running at 38% and you have stopped pretending that everything is fully resolved. Some of it is not resolved. Some of it never will be, and I think you need to hear that too. Before I go any further, I have a question for you. What is the thought that finds you at 2 in the morning? The specific one. The one that has been visiting you for years. The one you have never said out loud to anyone, because saying it out loud would make it more real than you are ready for it to be. You do not have to share the details, but write something in the comments. Even just the word "it." Even just the number of years it has been visiting you. I want to know I am not the only one lying awake. The first thing that comes at 2 in the morning is Margaret. Not a specific memory, just Margaret. The whole of her arriving at once the way a smell can bring back an entire decade. We were married for 51 years. She passed in 2021. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. 8 weeks is not enough time to say everything. 8 weeks is not enough time to undo 50 years of leaving things unsaid. I sat beside her bed in those last 2 weeks, and I talked more than I had talked in the previous 10 years combined. I said things I had been storing up for decades. I told her she was the best decision I ever made. I told her about the night in 1998 when she said she had been lonely for 11 years and I went to bed instead of listening. I told her I had thought about that night almost every day since. She held my hand. She said she knew. She said she had always known. And that is the part that visits me at 2 in the morning. Not that I said it too late, but that she always knew. That she had been carrying my love and my remorse and my inability to express either one of them for 50 years, and she had done it without complaint and without asking me to be different than I was. She deserved someone who could say it in the daylight. I gave her a man who could only say it when she was dying. I do not know what to do with that. Even now, I just carry it. The second thing that comes is a boy named Robert Haines. You do not know Robert Haines. Most people do not. In 1973, I was 29 years old and a junior engineer at my first real firm. Robert Haines was a colleague. Same level as me. Same age, roughly. Smart man. Thoughtful. The kind of engineer who took his time with a problem and got it right rather than the kind who moved fast and fixed it later. We were both being considered for the same promotion. I got the promotion. What I did to get it is something I have never told anyone, not Margaret, not David, not a single person in 50 years. I am going to tell you now. There was a miscalculation in a set of project drawings. Small. Technically Robert's error, but the kind of error anyone could have made under the schedule we were working to. I found it during a review. I corrected it quietly in my own copy. I submitted my version without saying anything to Robert. When the error was discovered in his submission, he was the one who answered for it. He was not fired, but he was not promoted either. I was. I have thought about Robert Haines at 2 in the morning more times than I can count. I do not know where he is now. I do not know if he ever got the career he was working toward. I do not know if what I did changed the direction of his life in ways that rippled out for decades. I hope it did not. I have no way of knowing. What I know is that I have never told anyone, and that the not telling has been its own kind of weight, not guilt exactly. Something quieter than guilt. Something more like a bill you have been carrying in your wallet for so long, you have stopped thinking about it until one day you open your wallet and there it is again. If Robert Haines is somehow listening to this, I am sorry. It was a cowardly thing. I was 29 and frightened and ambitious in the way that frightened young men are ambitious. That does not make it right. It just makes it true. I am sorry. The third thing that comes at 2 in the morning is a conversation I never had with my father. He died in 1979. I was 35. We had a complicated relationship the way men of that generation often had complicated relationships with their fathers. He was hard, not cruel, not violent, but hard in a way that left very little room for softness between us. I spent 30 years after he died being angry at him, 30 years. And then one night, maybe 10 years ago, I was lying awake and the thought arrived differently than it usually did. Instead of the familiar anger, there was something else underneath it, something I had not let myself look at directly before. He had been scared his whole life. That is what I finally understood. My father was a man who had grown up poor during the Depression, who had watched his own father lose everything, who had worked a factory job for 30 years not because he lacked ambition, but because ambition felt dangerous to a man who had seen what happened when things fell apart. He was not cold. He was armored. And I had spent 30 years being angry at a suit of armor for not being a warm embrace. I could not tell him that. He was gone. But I stopped being angry that night, not because he had done nothing wrong, but because I finally understood what had made him the way he was, and because I looked in the mirror sometime around my 60th birthday and realized that I had built the same armor. Different materials, same design. The armor I wore cost David the same things my father's armor cost me. That is the part that arrives at 2 in the morning. Not my father's failures. Mine. And the fourth thing is the trip I never took. In 1984, Margaret and I were 39 and 40 years old. The kids were young. Money was tight, but not desperate. A colleague of mine had just come back from 3 weeks in Italy, Florence and the Amalfi coast and a small town in Sicily whose name I cannot remember now. He would not stop talking about it. He said it had changed him, changed the way he thought about time and beauty and what a life was supposed to feel like. Margaret heard him talking about it at a company dinner, and on the drive home, she reached over and put her hand on my arm and said, "Harold, let us go to Italy." I said we could not afford it right now. She said we could find a way. I said maybe next year. We never went to Italy. Not in 1984. Not next year. Not the year after that. Not in the 1990s when the kids were older and the money was better. Not in the 2000s when I was earning more than I had ever earned and had every practical reason to go. There was always something. Always a project. Always a reason that next year would be better. Margaret never asked again after a certain point. She stopped asking the way people stop asking for things they have learned they will not receive. I booked a trip to Italy in 2020. March of 2020. You know what happened in March of 2020. The trip was canceled. We never rebooked. Margaret got sick the following year. A photograph of the Amalfi coast has been on the wall of my study since 2001. I put it there as a reminder to myself, as a promise, It became a monument instead. Go to Italy. I mean that literally if you have been postponing it. And I mean it as a metaphor for every trip and every experience and every version of your life you have been filing under next year. Next year is not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. Book the trip. The fifth thing that comes at 2 in the morning is the version of myself I never became. I want to be careful here because I do not want you to misunderstand me. I do not regret my career. I do not regret the work. I was good at what I did, and there is genuine satisfaction in that even now. I built things that are still standing. I solved problems that mattered. I am proud of the professional life I had. But somewhere around my early 40s, I made a quiet decision that I was never fully aware of making. I decided that the Harold who showed up at the office was the real Harold, and the Harold who came home at night was a secondary version, a supporting character in his own family's life, present enough to not be absent, checked in enough to not be checked out, but not fully there, not the full version. The full version stayed at the office, and the people who lived with me got the remainder. I think about the father I could have been if I had given my family the same quality of attention I gave my work. Not more time necessarily, just the same quality, the same focus, the same genuine investment in the problem in front of me. David was a problem worth solving. Margaret was a project worth showing up for fully. My daughter Claire, who I have not mentioned nearly enough in these videos, was a person who deserved the version of her father who was actually awake. They got the tired version, the distracted version, the version who was already thinking about tomorrow when today had not finished yet. I do not know how to calculate what that cost them. I just know that at 2 in the morning the calculation runs anyway. Here is my second question for today. Which version of yourself are the people closest to you actually getting? Not the version you intend to give them, not the version you believe you give them, the actual version, the one that shows up at the dinner table, the one that answers when they call, the one that is present when they are talking or distracted when they are talking, the one that saves its best energy for strangers at the office and gives its leftover energy to the people at home. Be honest with yourself about the answer. You do not have to write it in the comments. Just be honest about it in the quiet of wherever you are right now. And then decide if that version is the one you want to keep giving. It is 5:42 in the morning now. The street outside my window has gone from gray to gold. Someone is walking a dog down the block. A light came on in the house across the street. The world is starting its day. I have been awake for almost 4 hours. And here is the strange thing. Here is what I want to leave you with this morning. The 2 in the morning thoughts are not only painful, that is what I did not expect when I got old enough to start having them regularly. Some of them are just true. And there is something that feels almost like relief in finally sitting with the truth of your own life without flinching, without packaging it, without performing resolution you do not actually feel. Some things I did not resolve, some things I cannot fix, some apologies arrived too late and some trips never happened and some doors I stood outside of and chose not to knock on, and I am still here, still in my chair, still watching the street go gold, still glad to be alive even with all of it. That is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot. Leave me a comment this morning. Tell me what visits you at 2 in the morning. Tell me how long it has been coming. I read every single one and I want to hear it. And if someone in your life is lying awake right now carrying something they have never said out loud, send this to them. Let them know someone else is up at 2 in the morning too.